Howdy y'all, TheJTJ here, Roll to Wound. Today we're going to be talking about Soulblight Gravelord tactics, specifically the Allegiance ability, so stick around. Alright guys, today we're going to be covering the Allegiance abilities for the Soulblight Gravelords. I'm TheJTJ and I'm here with my man Chris. So diving right in quickly, sort of go over the old rules, so those of you that have played Legions of Nagash, you have sort of a understanding where we're coming from. And the first rule is Unquite Dead. It used to have a total of 4 grave sites on the board, and you needed a hero to bring out reserves within 9. And its Invigorating Aura, which was the heal, also had to be within 9. And keep in mind, these are both within, not holding. The old Deathless Minions was a 6++. When you had a hero within 6, Endless Legion was the big one, which was if you had a unit destroyed, your general was within 9 of a grave site for a CP, he could bring that whole unit back just like new. Locust was on a unmodified 9+ to cast. The spell goes off 2 times. Alright, so the new rules for the Unquite Dead. 4 total grave sites on the board. Set up reserves within 12 inches and within 9 away from an enemy hero. You don't need a hero to bring your units out. You want to talk a little bit about setting up those grave sites, just sort of where you're supposed to do it, what can you bring out of those?
Yeah, so you have 2 that have to go in your territory, 2 in the enemy territory, and I think that actually might be a change because I wasn't old Legions of Nagash, 2 in your own, and then was it 2 anywhere else?
2 anywhere
Yeah,
else.
yeah. So I think it makes a distinction now, 2 in the enemy. So sure, there's plenty of games
It's
where
outside your territory. So on the new rule is you can pick up 2 points within your territory and up to 2 points anywhere on the battlefield
uh,
outside your territory. So the distinction isn't in enemy territory, because you know how some
yeah,
enemy territory is flush with yours. Some
right.
actually have no man's land. So I think that's the distinction.
All right, that's good because I thought for some reason I read that it was enemy because that would be big. But yeah, now you can play a little more interesting with your deployment because it's anything summonable can come out of that, which your zombies, your skeletons, and all that stuff. But the fact that you don't need a hero to trigger that, in my opinion, is actually a really big positive change. Allows you to possibly have something deploy deep behind the enemy, not requiring you to have a hero sneak around. So I think that's a good one.
All right, we have the Locus of Shaish, which is pretty much the same as the old one. Unmodified 9 to cast. The spell goes off 2 times. Deathless Minion, you get your 6 up. After all the wounds have been through, you'll get that other roll, and this one is wholly within 12 of a hero or a gravesite. Reanimated Horror, which is our now not quite army-wide bravery debuff. Negative 1 bravery for an enemy within 6 of one of these units. Negative 2 bravery if there's within 6 of 2 or more of death rattle or dead walkers. That's the important keyword there. And the other important thing to note about that is death units. Other enemy death units are not affected by this. So that's technically a quarter of all armies aren't affected by this.
Yeah, well, and then you think about that. I think Night Haunt, it's like their whole army is just -1 to your bravery if you're by them, and they don't care if you're death or not. So they've got, in my opinion, a better version of this.
The other new rules is Endless Legion. End of the battle shock, roll a dice, adding the number of enemy units destroyed this phase to the roll. On a 5-up, bring back a destroyed unit at half strength within 12 inches of a grave site, 9 inches away from an enemy unit. So just understanding that you're bringing your destroyed units back on a roll of a 5-up at half strength. It's a big distinction. Just want to make sure that that is clear. Deathly Invocation. Deathly Invocation is now the healing of the of our army. Heroes can add wounds / models back to a unit wholly within 12. The number of units are based off a chart. The chart's in the book. We'll go ahead and you want to go over that chart real quick?
Yeah, it is, I think, 4 for Mortarks, 3 for Vampires, 2 for Death Mages, and 2 for Death Rattle. So if your hero has one of those keywords, if it has multiple, you pick which one. Obviously, you pick the better of them, but the fact that the unit can only be affected by this once really neuters it, in my opinion. So,
The other thing when we're talking about keywords on that chart to everybody to look at, vampire there's a lot of vampire keywords on War Scrolls. However, you got to remember it's got to be a vampire hero. So just know that if just because it has a vampire keyword, it doesn't necessarily heal. And at first, I thought that was what it did, and I got excited. I was like, "Oh, Blood Knights can heal themselves," and then it's like,
I know.
and you are correct. The unit cannot be affected more than one time, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. All right, so we're going to cover the big differences between the two. The Unquite Dead, the 12-inch setup range is up from 9, so that's good. We got a little bit further out. You do not need a hero to activate that, as like in the past, you had to have that hero within 9 inches to make this actually happen. And well, there is gravesite healing, correct? Because you get it under.
No. Gravesites only provide their deathless, deathless save.
Oh, that's right. It is. It's only the deathless save. You can pop them out from resurrections, and you can bring them up from reserve. So
that's right.
We're losing a lot of healing just right off the bat. Locust, no change. Deathless Minions unit has to be wholly within 12, not within 6. So we're no more spreading, no more conga lines. Reanimated Horror is new. However, it's kind of the old banner, so most of the units that get Reanimated Horror actually had it in the old edition. It was just a War Scroll ability for their banners. Endless Legion, not command point driven. No need for a hero. And you need to roll a 5-up. So you don't get to use that, hey, I got my general here, I've got extra CPs, we're going to make it happen. You're going to have to roll a 5-up.
Probably an important.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's an important distinction that need to roll a 5-up can also be modified by the number of enemy units you destroy. So while you have a 1 in 3 chance by default, it can get a little better, but this isn't going to be the super reliable. I got 1 CP, so I can definitely bring something back right now. It's kind of, I got to get kind of lucky.
Deathly Invocation is now an Allegiance ability and not a War Scroll ability. They basically, I think you had talked about that in the last episode, they just sort of cleaned up the War Scroll with it, which I'm fine with. But units wholly within 12 heal, not within 6. So it used to be within, now it's wholly within 12. That wholly within 12 range band is, we expected it from the old book, because the old book was so old, but it is definitely in here. All right, so now we're going to get into tactics that we've now sort of give you an overview of those rules. Unquiet Dead. The Unquiet Dead, you can use the 2 points outside your territory to bring up units in the opponent's backfield. They have to account for that and deploy with that in mind. So basically, when you're laying out your grave sites, this used to be some of my biggest choices in Legion. Where am I putting my grave sites? What I'm going to do? You want to talk about a few things that people could think about when they're doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I think before I didn't play, I touched on it before, I didn't play a super heavy Skeleton Zombie Legion Nagash list before. So I didn't really use this a whole lot. But now the fact that you don't have to have a hero activate it, I'm definitely going to try to make advantage of this, whether that be Direwolves or something you put in the as reserve. So, maybe you start playing mind games with your opponent. Maybe you have no intention of popping them out in their back lines, but they have to respect that, because if they don't, then that becomes a valid option for you, potentially, depending on the game. So I think is actually even more important where you place the grave sites now than it was before, because I think it'll be more usable. And in fact, as the game goes on, I think that's where it's even going to become more important, because there could be a turn 3 or turn 4 where you get lucky with bringing back a unit. Sure, it could be at half strength, but if your enemy is out of position, that can sneak you something, especially on games where there's an objective deep in each other's territories. So I think that will actually be a sneaky, really good part of the book.
Yeah, and this is one way that slow armies can get around their, their movement. And I still will say it that Age of Sigmar currently in second edition is a movement game. Like you got to control points, you got to be able to move. When I played Skaven, the biggest thing that the detriment was it was just a really static, slow, castled up army. Null holes worked a lot like these points. Also, you always had to respect them. If I was playing against a Skaven player, he can throw some null holes out there, and you're like, well, I got to, I don't want a rattling gun coming through it, so let me put a unit sitting on babysitting it for a whole game.
Yep.
Deploy the grave sites next to objectives in your territory, but a little away from objectives in enemy territory. What I mean by this is, if I know that I have some objectives in my territory that I'm firmly going to hold, I want to put my grave sites right on them. That way I get my full auras of healing. I'm stacking my units right in it. But when you're looking at the enemy territory, one thing you probably don't want to do is put your gravesite right next to that objective, because that's a benefit for your opponent. Because what he's going to be able to do is, oh, I'll just stick a unit, a 5-man unit right on top of that objective, hold the objective, and block your gravesite out from bringing anything up. So when you're placing your gravesites, you don't want them right on top of enemy objectives. You want to sort of space them a little bit out, so you still will have that benefit of popping some guys up and then maybe rushing that objective the next turn. When you set your gravesites up, I always like to think about, hey, like I know that we've talked to list building a lot, and my armies are probably going to look a lot different from yours. I'm going to be more of a static, slow, defensive-based armies. I'm going to set my gravesites up closer to midfield, closer to like that mosh pit in the middle of the board. However, you're going to be more of like asynchronous warfare. How would you look at setting your gravesites up?
Yeah, kind of what I mentioned earlier. I think just looking at some of the early list building that I've done, I'll definitely have one deep back into enemy territory, like opposite board edge is probably what I'm thinking. That way, that is going to be either one, as they deploy, they have to pull something back to zone that out early on, or two, that's going to potentially give me a pseudo deep striker outflank late game if I get the summon back. So that's kind of how I'm viewing it, because my lists are kind of hit the enemy kind of hard head on, but try to use either outflanking or summoning from the sides or back to try to create a sandwich or a pincer type deal. Is kind of what I'm thinking right now, is how I'll probably be utilizing these.
And the last thing to touch on with this real quick is sort of how Legion of Night has the ability to do a lot of outflanking, to pop things up. And you can look at this gravesite placement as a bonus to that. I can put some gravesites sort of on the edge where I'm like saying, hey, I'm going to bring my units out there. This can maybe give them the 6++. This can help strengthen those edges. But then again, it could look redundant with Legions of the Night, because Legions of the Night is giving you that extra movement in ways. But you could use them together. You could say, hey, I'm going to use these two center grave sites to pop these units up. I'm going to use the board edges to come in with, Black Knights or something. I don't know why you run them, but you come in with Black Knights, and you can totally surround the enemy and try to lock them into their territory.
For sure.
All right, so now we're moving on to the Locust. Roll is unmodified, so no stacking casting buffs to make it go off. It's a big thing to understand. So if you're playing somebody out there that's trying to stack it, it's not going to work. When selecting spells, look for ones that help, that actually benefit from going off 2 times. Do you want to talk about these spells and how they would actually work a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So in 2.0 right now, you can stack debuffs on things if you wanted. So if this goes off, Like you have mentioned, Overwhelming Dread, Fading Vigor, Decrepify, all good from the lore of Necromancers. You can really neuter a single unit, or you can spread it out if you want. 3.0, we don't know if that's going to change, so we'll see how that works. And then the Amaranthian Orb is always a decent one where you can just shoot out multiple mortal wounds, potentially on multiple units. So if that goes off, then that's awesome. You can possibly get several D3 mortal wounds going on several units. So, like you said, you can't modify it. It's unmodified 9 to cast. And then with 3rd edition, if they're going to change stacking debuffs and buffs, then this will change things up, because I personally like to focus fire, so to speak, on a specific unit usually. So I'll usually, if it goes off twice, I'll usually double stack it on things, and just all of a sudden now I'm like, okay, I don't care about that unit. It's not that big of a threat to me. It's kind of how I used to visualize using that in most games, really.
No, I agree. I generally say, hey, this is the biggest threat to me. I want to make it not a threat to me, or as little as threat as possible, and then other stuff I can handle. But maybe the big block or the big baddie right there in front of you, you need to get them down. Spells to look at, like maybe are going to get no benefit from it, is Pinions, which the reason it gets no benefit is because it could technically go off twice, but you have to put it on the person that cast it, because this is self, and it actually says you can't use it benefit from the spell more than once. So right there in the rules, can't do it. Soul Pike's another one, and any War Scroll spells. I used to get this rule, especially when I first started playing, wrong. I thought that any spell that my Death Wizards cast, it was going off twice. It is not.
Yeah, I would love to have Dance Macabre to go off multiple times. That would have been awesome.
All right, so we have Deathless Minions. Another benefit of the Grey Sites is, keep in mind, is for placement. You're going to get that 6 up, and then you want to look at things, because that is a benefit. Most of the hordes of stuff are low saves anyway. I mean, zombies don't even have a save, so they're basically just working off of that. So having those grave sites in place and factoring that in, is very good for your survivability. There's a couple artifacts that I'll talk about. The Vicos
Yep.
artifacts, and you got the I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. The Ulfencarnine, whatever. Friendly Soulblight Gravelords units affected by the Deathless Minions battle trait, while they are holy with 18 of the bear instead of 12. So that just makes that aura bigger. Something to think about if you're maybe you want to run mass hordes of zombies and stuff. This might be something decent. What about the Blood Knight one?
Yeah, so it's the Castili Dynasty. It's the Gravesand Shard, and I'll read it out first and kind of go over it. So it says, once per battle at the start of the hero phase, you can say that the bear will crush their Gravesand Shard. If you do, add 1 to the roll for the Deathless Minions battle trait for all friendly Soulblight Gravelord units wholly within 12 of the bear until the end of that turn. Now, 2 things to note. It's added the start of the hero phase, not the start of your hero phase. So, now granted, it's not until the end of, or until the start of your next turn. So a lot of times you get your buffs up. If you get double turn, okay, your buffs are still up. In this case, it only happens until the end of the turn. But you can at least crack it if you want in their turn. But I don't really see that happening a whole lot necessarily, because if they know what it is, if they really were threatened by your additional save, they can just not engage those units. So the way I see it, and from some of the lists I've written for it, is if you want some Blood Knights or something going extremely aggressive, and it doesn't have to be Blood Knights, it can be anything that's Soulblight Gravelords, so your skeletons and zombies too. But if you want to go real aggressive, you pop that, and then all of a sudden, instead of 1 in 6, you have a 1 in 3 chance of shrugging damage with your Deathless Minions. So, I mean, it is a once per game thing, and I usually shy away from once per game things, but I think there are ways to use it, and in fact, I've written a few lists that do use it, so at least on paper, I think it could be decent.
And one thing to keep in mind, this works on your hero models, so they get it themselves, and that's the biggest thing. I mean, most people get that, but your heroes, basically every hero in the book is going to get their 6++.
Yep.
All right, Reanimated Horrors, which is our bravery debuff for some of the units. When you're just sort of looking at this, hey, what can I stack? What does this influence? What does this help? And there's a couple of things out there. The Legion of Blood has a command trait. Um, it is
Soul crushing contempt.
Yeah, there you go. Soul Crushing Contempt. Subtract 1 from the bravery characteristic of enemy units while they are within 3 inches of this general. And don't forget that the Legion of Blood actually has that extra D3 run from Felon Battle Shock. So if you have your general and a couple zombie units next to a unit, they're going to be -3. If they do Felon Battle Shock, there's going to be an extra D3 running. Yeah. Spell wise, you got Spirit Gale.
Yeah, you got a few ways to really modify it if you want to play around the debuff, bravery debuff tactic. I don't know. I've seen some people try to do it, and it just doesn't seems like you really focus on that, and it's a one-trick pony in the sense that if you can't get it to work, you're so screwed. And then if you get paired up against OBR, then forget about it. Anyways.
Yeah, it's one of those deals where it's in the book. A good player is going to know how to take advantage of it and you maximize its effectiveness. But it's, as far as this book goes, it's not I'm going to build everything around it. Spirit Gale, Nagash's Soul Stealer, which is probably one of the best benefits in here, is the Soul Stealer from Nagash. If anybody ever plays him again, maybe in 3rd edition when supposedly magic missiles go up to D3 and D6 damage, you'll see him, but I'll believe it when I see it. So
yeah.
All right, so we are on the Endless Legion ability. So bringing your stuff back is try position or screen at least one gravesite so it can be far enough away that you can actually bring somebody back. If I decide to center stack all of my gravesites right in the middle of the board, right in the mosh pit, it's going to be easy for the enemy player to get close enough that even if you do roll that 5 up, you're not going to have anywhere to put that unit. You're not going to be able to bring them back because they're all going to be covered. There's a couple ways to think about this. Like you were saying, hey, you could put a gravesite just in a corner away from everything, so you always know that, hey, I could pop something up there. If you're playing more static, like probably I'll play with zombies, I'll put it behind my lines, put it at the back of my lines, so it's sort of well protected and shielded. Just keep this in mind. It's one of those deals where on that 5 up now, you can't guarantee it either. But keep in mind, if you do get that to go off, have somewhere to bring them back.
Yeah.
Deathly Invocation. Units have to be wholly within is the big thing. And I've sort of threw up the list of summonable units. So these are the units that will benefit from this. Deadwalker Zombies, Black Knights, Graveguard, Death Rattle Skeletons, Dire Wolves, and Fellbats. I don't think I missed one. Probably may have, but that's pretty much what you're able to heal with Deathly Invocation.
Yeah, and you can not only heal, I think a lot of people probably know this, but you can bring models back. Obviously, 1 wound models, that's obvious, right? But things that are multi-wound, like Black Knights, you roll essentially a 3, 4, 5, or 6, you can bring a model back, assuming nothing else is hurt. So that's kind of nice to be able to bring back multi-wound models. So it can be useful, but like we touched on, it got supremely nerfed this go around, where you can't have 5 heroes bringing back D3, 5 D3 models to 1 unit. Now they can only be a recipient once per turn, so that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and the more I get it, I have gotten upset about it a little bit because I used to play so many chain rats or so many skeletons, and it's just like that's what kept them on the board. was being able to put back between 3 and 4 or 5 a turn. But if we look at it though, especially when it looks at the skeletons and the zombies, a lot of their healing is now on their war scroll, and it's just done in different ways. So I think that that's another thing that people will start realizing as they play this more, that, oh yeah, I can heal these. It just doesn't look the same as it used to. And until I play test this 100 times, I'm not going to know if that skeleton 2 up bringing models back, is it better? It probably is. If you really think about it, if you kill 15 of my skeletons, I'm rolling a 2 up for each one. I'm probably bringing 10 to 12 back.
I think the skeletons are 4 up, isn't it? And the zombies are a 2 up.
Oh, you're correct. It is the zombies, and they're getting a 2 up for every model they kill.
You're right. And the skeleton, yeah, you roll a dice for everyone that died in the combat phase. Yeah. When they go to fight. I think the one thing, it's kind of ironic. Everyone talks about death is so reliant on their heroes, which I 100% agree with. But this book has made changes where I would argue that we're less reliant on heroes. Example being the grave sites can give your Deathless Minions. You don't need a hero to pop up summonable units from the graves. You have now healing that is in the war scroll, like you mentioned. So there's ways you could have, a unit of 20 skeletons go sit on an objective by themselves with a gravesite. They're still getting their deathless save. They're still potentially regenerating. Whereas before, you set a unit of 20 skeletons by themselves with nothing. They're pretty crap, at least defensively. So I think, like you said, it's going to take some actual play testing, but I almost like this more, but I don't know. We'll see. I like that you're not necessarily auto defeated when your heroes are gone. So there's that.
I do know my mistake. I don't know how I confuse this. The Black Knights on a 2 up on their impact hits, and then for some reason I read that right next war scroll is the Death Rattle, which is, you're correct, a 4 up to bring them back. So that substantially takes down the odds. All right, so we're off to the summation of sort of the allegiance abilities, our thoughts and feelings. So Chris, go ahead and take it away. Go over what you think about the allegiance abilities in general.
Right. So kind of my knee-jerk reaction here is, overall, if you want to play this like Legions of Nagash, I think it's probably you'd probably feel this as a nerf book. However, I think that it allows you to play different play styles more effectively. And so again, I come back to the gravesite placement. I think that's going to be critical, and I think you can really, depending on the mission, of course, and where the objectives are on the board, you can really use your Endless Legion late game to bring in, I think, direwolves. Like, obviously, if you are in back of the enemy territory with your grave, if you're bringing back skeletons or zombies that are moving slow, they're probably going to be not very effective late game. But if you're bringing back 5 zombie models, or direwolf models, they're moving 10, so they're quick. So if someone decides just, round 3 to move off their back objectives and push you and leave them open, then all of a sudden that is a huge threat. So I think that I really do like the change on how we can bring stuff out of the grave. Now, granted, I don't like the change of not having the guarantee use 1 CP and get a unit back at full strength. Now it's a dice roll and half strength. So that's kind of crappy, but I mean, it is what it is. The Deathly Invocation, I don't like that you can't double dip, so to speak, have multiple heroes heal the same unit. I mean, I get why they did it, but I still think because they have to be wholly within, there's still limitations. Because before you can daisy chain them, like you mentioned, you can't do that anymore. And so that would mean if you could heal the same unit with multiple heroes with your Deathly Invocation, those heroes are going to have to be, I think, closer because you're having to stay wholly within 12. So that means you're kind of having to commit multiple heroes to a single unit potentially. So I feel like there's ways they could have still made Deathly Invocation a little more useful without it maybe being as overpowered as it once was, but it feels a little underpowered. So, looking at the book without play testing it and just looking at the allegiance abilities and nothing else, it looks like things got potentially nerfed in a lot of areas. But I think holistically, and when you spend time looking at the book, you'll see that there's play in it, and it's just going to take some adapting to play style, not just saying, "Oh, I played Legions of Nagash. I'm going to play this exactly the same way and expect to be just as efficient potentially." So that's kind of my opinion on the allegiance abilities as a whole.
For me, gravesites are better for reserves, but no healing takes the overall staying power of the army down. Now healing is more hero dependent, and heroes can be sniped. Glad Locust stayed the same. I think it is one of my favorite abilities in the game, except when 3rd edition comes and don't let us stack the debuffs, and it'll just be okay, cool. I think there's some really good magic builds that I'm going to say in this book there's going to be some magic builds, and I haven't even got to the point of this book yet to actually start pulling in a lot of the endless spells and some of those things to really start digging into that and how those will interact. So I just think this is not a low tier magic army. This is one of your higher tiers. Now we're not Seraphon or high elves, but you're going to be able to bring some spells to the table. Reanimated Horror is a knife buff, but it doesn't work on a quarter of the armies out there, so it's kind of like, okay. But I mean, fluff wise, it makes sense. So I can't really say, oh, this was stupid. But at the same time, it's like, it's gonna catch you one day where you're like, oh, I wish I had that debuff.
Yeah.
Endless Legions is hot garbage compared to the old rule. The only thing that makes it better is not having to have a hero or CP. And yes, I'm not in any, I understand that there is benefits. It's changed. It has its own thing now. But it was just that was always my crutch. Oh, I messed up. That 40 block of skeletons are dead. Oh, I got a CP. I'll bring them back. Deathly Invocation is much worse. No stack healing. Um, I think if they left the stacking heals, this would have made the book so much better. Like to me, in my play style, my thoughts, like just let me stack the heals, because it seems like it wants you to take a lot of heroes anyway for the book. The Holy Within restriction was expected. In general, looking at Allegiance abilities in a vacuum, it's a significant downgrade for me. Um, but I agree to your points that we haven't dug enough in to see how the War Scrolls are affecting everything. But just on paper, just looking at old to new, I think it took it down a notch in general. But there's a lot of factors. 3rd edition's coming. War Scrolls are different. So we'll see in time. And that's going to do it for the Allegiance Ability Tactics overview. Thanks for watching. Y'all be good.